have so much fun doing our monthly webinars and complimentary workshops here at the emPowered PR Group. We always enjoy, I always enjoy sharing these with you guys because there's so much information in the marketing world to take in and digest. And it's kind of uncomfortable or nerve-wracking or overwhelming to figure out what's the right next step to do. So the emPowered PR Group offers these complimentary monthly workshops really as a tool, a strategy, as a resource to help nonfiction authors, and quite frankly, fiction authors can benefit from this too, to navigate the marketing space. So for those of you guys who don't know me, I know Paulette, I know you, Abigail, I've not yet had the chance to meet you, and those who might be listening and watching this, the recording of it, I want to make sure to introduce myself. My name is Stephanie Feiger. I am the owner and I am the chief strategist of the emPowered PR Group. And I'm really, really glad that you're here today. What a better way to, well, what a great way to start 2022 than with some planning and some strategy and content specifically. So before I dive into all of that, first thing I'm going to do is check and make sure nobody else is hanging out in the waiting room. All right, I don't see anybody else in the waiting room. I'll check that periodically here. But I also wanted to just kind of share who the emPowered PR Group is and how we can help before we dive into anything. I'll keep this part brief. The emPowered PR Group really helps nonfiction authors write marketable books, promote those books to those who need and want them, but specifically those who will buy them as well, and help people, especially authors, build meaningful businesses around their books' empowering messages. We have some signature programs that we help make that happen, and it's really meant to help accomplish your marketing needs wherever you, author friend, are on the book marketing journey. For those who know our team, know me specifically, you'll likely agree that empowerment is something that is really pivotal to the work that we do and to who I am. So this is really fun for me to be able to do. We also host the emPowered Author podcast. If you don't listen to the podcast yet, it is available on any platform where there are podcasts that you can absorb and listen. We would love for you to tune in and listen to us there as well. It is the emPowered Author podcast, and it releases once a week. So you'll have a slew of other marketing content there to be able to absorb and take action on. But today, we are doing our emPowered Author workshops. And let me just tell you briefly about these. If you don't already know about them, these are ones that we host monthly. They are a complimentary service that we provide to nonfiction authors. We think they're so valuable and there's so much out there that we want to make sure we are really giving everybody what they need and knowing how to navigate them in that marketing space. So today we'll highlight some innovative strategic tactics, some strategies, and if you find that there's anything here that is really valuable over that you're trying to figure out as if it's a good fit for you or not, we also provide support to help you. So don't feel like you have to do any of this alone. We can help you, and at the end of the call, I'll put a link where we can schedule a 15-minute chit chat and figure out if there's something we can help you with there. Before we get started specifically, I'm double checking again, seeing if there's anybody else in our room. Okay. And but before, I want to go over a couple of housekeeping. We will have about 45 minutes, 50 minutes or so of content, and this particular workshop has a lot of information that we are going to be diving in. So I will be running a mile a minute to get through it all. And that's why I just ask, feel free to ask questions in the chat. We'll open up from the chat to having a good verbal conversation if need be when we get to that part. But until then, if there's something that I talk about and you're like, I don't want to forget to ask that question, that is totally fine. Put it in the chat. Just make sure it's got some context to it so that later when we're done, you'll be like, oh, I remember why I asked that question. Also, I know I mentioned at the start, but I'll remind here, we are recording this call. All of our monthly workshops are recorded and they live on our YouTube channel. So you can go back and access those. You'll also be able to access this one and find us on YouTube. I'll send a link to y'all afterwards. So you have that and you can go back and look at that. And if you're on this call, we've added you to our email list. If you are watching this in a recorded version, then let me know if you want to be added to our list too. The reason we put you on there is our email list is the first group of people that find out about the topics for the future workshops. All right, hang tight. Heather, it's so nice to see you. I'm going to put you on mute, and that way we don't hear any background noise. Okay, awesome. All righty, I think that is all of the housekeeping notes I wanted to go over. And so today we're going to dive in to creating your book marketing content strategy. It's a lot of like buzzwords in one little phrase, but great information that I can't wait to talk about. I know that I've always come from a world where, what you say matters. And I have a background in PR, marketing, communications. I've done countless TV interviews, radio spots, PSAs, ads, trainings, etc. And so I've always known that every single word that I say matters. But in the last decade or so, I've realized that not only are the words that we say matter, but the ones that we write matter. And we know that, author friends, that that's really important. And the evolution of the marketing space has made that even more and more prevalent. Marketing used to just be marketing, but now it's so much more. I actually was speaking with an author last week who said, I was a part of the sales and marketing force a long time ago. It was great. But that was, 40 years ago, and marketing just in the last 2 years continues to evolve. And he is right. He is right. There's so much more that you can do now. And that's why it's really important that we really start right here, right now, and understanding a little bit more about marketing and really how we can leverage our story, our message, and our content to help support that. So I want to level set. Let's see, let's get this clicking going. I want to level set right now and make sure that all of us understand like what marketing can do, because marketing can do a lot of things. I have to start by saying, though, I realize that I love marketing and not everybody does. I'll never forget, ever forget the author that told me, Stephanie, I would rather clean toilets than do book marketing. So I realize I have a lot of fun and energy around this topic. And hopefully by the end of this call, you guys will decide that it's more fun than cleaning toilets. So what can marketing do? Well, marketing can do a lot of things. Marketing can help people learn about you. It can help people see you as relevant in their lives and really pique their interest in what you have to offer. And I keep that vague. I'm keeping that vague today because many nonfiction authors are writing books as the book is something, a conduit to even something bigger. So when we talk about offerings, we're talking about your books, but also something more, should you want to go down that path. And we can talk more about that here in a little bit too. Marketing can provide that conduit for people to decide if you are a good fit for them and if they want to engage with you and how. So it's really important that we are crystal clear with what we offer, because we want people to like opt in and say, yes, you're somebody I want to engage with, and content can help make that happen. We'll also talk about that later. Marketing can help build and engage in relationships with people, and it can increase your visibility to groups of people who need what you have to share. It also can help build your reputation. It can increase your credibility, increase your reach. It can also become a communication channel between you and those who are interested in you and what you offer, and the fact that you are a solution to their problems. Marketing can also boost sales. It can help supporting the selling of a book, position you as a professional speaker, or other derivative offerings. And you notice that I mentioned that at the bottom, because today, even though that's probably the goal of all of ours, we want to sell books. We want to extend our reach. There's so much more that marketing can do. And I want all of us to realize kind of that in a grand scope, kind of grand perspective. Now, when most people think of marketing, they actually think of what the industry calls as outbound marketing. Outbound marketing really involves proactive reaching out to people, right? So that's where the out comes in, to get customers interested in a product, a book, your offerings. But this requires time, and it also oftentimes requires a budget. Some of the people in this industry, in the marketing industry, look at outbound marketing as kind of chasing customers. You're out looking for the leads, and where can you find warm leads, and try to navigate those cold leads. You're out there, you're trying to get them and pulling them in. And this tends to be harder to convert, but it's honestly when most people think of marketing, it's what they think about. But there is another part of marketing, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And it's on the other end of the spectrum. It's called inbound marketing. And this, by contrast, is focused on creating and distributing content that draws people to you. So you're not going out looking for everybody. Instead, you're creating a platform and a engagement kind of space for people to come to you. It's really focused on attracting people versus chasing them. And I don't know about y'all, but that sounds so much more fun instead of chasing. And it also leverages content to do it, which is why in January, I decided this is a great place for us to start. And that's why we're here today. That's what we're here to talk about: how to leverage your content to help you invite people into your world, to show them your offerings, your books, and your business. Lots of really awesome things that inbound marketing can actually do. All right. Occasionally, I'm going to check you guys to see if anybody's in the waiting room. I don't want them stuck out there. Okay, so let me just kind of highlight what it is we're going to talk about today. And like I said in the onset, we have a lot to go over. We are going to talk about these 5 different things. We're going to talk about target audience obsession. Kind of a fun word, a fun phrase together. We're going to then discuss the they ask, you answer approach to content and inbound marketing. I'm going to share how I leverage content, because I am a big fan of working smarter, not harder, and I want to share that approach with you. I'm going to discuss some ways to create a drumbeat in the work that you do and in your content creation, and then we're going to discuss how do you put it in action. A lot to talk about, so I say feel free to take notes, but rest assured you can access this video later. All right, so before we dive in, I have to share that the good half of this call is focused on this particular book, They Ask, You Answer. It is an amazing book. I will share a link with that too for you guys if you want to grab it and snatch it off of Amazon. But They Ask You Answer is a book I actually was able to read at the end of last quarter. I've been doing a lot of this inbound marketing over the years, and then I found this book, and this just proves that we're always on a constant evolution of learning. And I fell upon this book and fell in love with it. And most books I don't read more than once, but I'm like on number 3 reading this book, 3rd round. It is probably the most game-changing book that I have read in the marketing space. And we are going to spend energy talking about the key themes that were found in They Ask You Answer today. It really has not just been game-changing for me, though. I've already started implementing They Ask You Answer principles in the work that I get to do with authors around the world. So I'm pumped about that. So today we're going to share some of Marcus Sheridan's insights and how they're really applicable to you, an author. So the book is not written for authors. So I'm going to pull out how it's really relevant to us as authors. And we're going to start with the target audience discussion. So Marcus Sheridan talks about this important kind of element of being obsessed with your target audience. Like, not just your target audience, but you're downright obsessed in a beautiful way, obsessed, not in a creepy way, obsessed. So I don't want to get into the super nitty gritty on target audience analysis right now. That's not really the essence of this call, but to be completely honest, to have a strong content marketing strategy, you must know who your target audience is. There's a story that happened, or there's a situation that happened to me decades ago where I really started to realize the importance of wants and needs as it pertains to a target audience. And it's something that I share with a lot of authors about how not only do you need to know who your target audience is, but it's important to know what drives them, what their wants are, but deeper what their needs are, because if you understand their needs, then you can identify those trigger points of where they're going to invest their money in. And we want our books to become a need, not just a want. If it's a want, our books become great beach reads. If it's a need, it's a book that they will purchase with discretionary funds that they already have allocated aside for budget line items. That's where we want our books to be needs. So, many of us are writing books that we love, but we sometimes forget about the fact that we actually want to sell the books. We want to sell copies. And to do that, we need to write books that others need and that others are willing to invest in and will buy. That's a story for another day, but it is important that before you write your manuscript, while you're in the thick of writing your manuscript, after you've published your book, years later after you've published and your book's been out, that you have clarity on who your book can reach and be most impacted by. So it's really smart to sit down and identify who this target audience or audiences may be, who can benefit most from what you've written. And you might find, 3 to 5 target audiences. I'm a big fan of like really, really niching down, because the more that you do, the more you can speak to them. So even if you've got just 1 or 2, that's brilliant. So I would say our first step is to identify your target audience. Who is it? And understand them. Like, think about them. It can't just be everyone. I always say there's over 7 billion people in the world. And if you say everyone can benefit from your book, which they might, you're never going to reach anybody. So focus down and really figure out who is going to benefit most from what you're going to provide. Then become obsessed with them. This is where this work comes in. Marcus encourages us to not just know our target audience, but to really know them, like deep down know them. He encourages you to really evaluate, what is your customer or your target reader? See, we're going to be thinking about this like a reader from a nonfiction author. What do your reader, your target audiences, what are they thinking? What are they searching for? Why did they pick up your book in the first place? What are some of the questions that they're asking themselves while they're navigating the manuscript in front of you? What are some of the problems that they have? Some of the things that they're struggling most with? What are they feeling? What are they fearing? These are all really good questions. And you want to ask yourself these questions through the lens of this target audience, because that's going to help you learn more about what they need and what they're looking for your book and your message to do. So we will talk about how at the end, how to put all of this into action. But the beginning stage of really building a strong content strategy is a strong content inbound marketing strategy is by brainstorming a list of every and any question somebody in your target audience, your target reader, may ask of you, or may be asking Google, or is anybody in your target audience might be asking themselves. And you just want to do like a brain dump. I think the first time I read the book, I think I typed 6 pages single spaced of every question that someone might ask about my book or about the emPowered PR group. And no question ranked higher or lower than the other. I just threw them out there. And I want you to do that. I want you to, not right now on the call, though you can start kind of taking notes, or if you've got a Word doc up, get that going at the same time and be asking yourself these questions, or jotting down some questions he might ask you along the way. But this is something that I would set aside 30 minutes and just, I was going to say word vomit, just word vomit on the page, just get it out, and you'll start to notice some trends. This then takes us into what I am calling the they ask you answer approach. So let me pause for a minute. I want to tell you a little bit about Marcus Sheridan. So Marcus Sheridan owned and still owns a fiberglass swimming pool business that was doing fantastic until about 2008, and it was impacted by the economic downfall. He found himself in a spot where he either had to figure something else out or he had to close the business. They were on the verge of bankruptcy, and he realized he really needed a miracle. So instead of closing the business, he decided to give it one more shot. And he took a step back and he said, okay, I need more people, more leads and sales, or my business is going to go out of business in just a matter of months. So he realized what he needed to do is think like his target audience and then become obsessed with them. How he did that was he started to realize he himself was turning to the internet for everything. Any question that he had, he was looking for answers on the internet. He would go to our friend Google and Google it. And he started to notice that the internet was really a platform for looking for answers to your questions. It was a platform for everything. And the old school ways like that he was using of yellow pages and newspaper and radio ads, like that just wasn't going to cut it anymore. So he decided that he was going to try something revolutionary and so simple, and ended up being the answer to his business growth. He said he had a moment, and you'll read in this book, he had a moment where he like even talked to himself and said, Marcus, just answer people's questions. you just answer people's questions, you will be a solution for them. And he shares at the heart of everything that we do, and the heart that what he does, and it's the heart of you, an author, is really the fact that we're all teachers. So he decided to leverage the fact that we are all teachers and that he was a teacher and use that as a skill on the internet. So his approach became super simple, and it still works today. So it starts at the top with becoming obsessed with what who your audience is and what their needs are, what their questions are. And then you become their answer to their questions. It seems so simple, right? When you start to create content that becomes an answer to somebody's question, several things happen. We'll talk about those here in a minute. But the first thing that happens is you start to build trust with somebody. When you become the answer to a question, when you answer a question that someone's out there looking for, people start to trust you. And that building of trust makes them want to purchase your book, invest in your speaking engagements, be a part of your derivative offerings, come to your workshops, whatever that looks like. So that is the audience obsession and becoming their answer is really the two big prongs of the they ask you answer approach. And then I tossed in the fact that you've got to create content, build trust, and continue the obsession, because it's a cyclical pattern. Because as you're doing it, you're going to start talking to people who've read your book, and they're going to ask you new questions. And you're going to go, oh, I need to answer that question. And the more that you're obsessed with the fact that you wrote something meaningful and you care about what people think and what they think about your message, the more likely it is that you're going to be able to create content that's going to provide inbound marketing and bring people to you. So what does this mean for you as an author? The first is identify your target audience and become obsessed with them. So I want you to be thinking, who are they? What do they think, feel, struggle with? What questions are they asking? And how can you become their answer? Most people search online for their answers to their questions. So content is a solution, because when they're searching online, the beautiful thing is that internet pulls content from all sources. And the more information you're sharing, the higher your search engine optimization, the more likely you're seen and people are finding you. And you can do that in multiple ways. You can be a solution for people through writing blogs on your website, posting YouTube videos, leveraging podcasts, being visible on social. There's lots of different ways you can do it. And remember, like when we're writing content, if our whole goal is to sell books and to grow the platform we're doing, and we're writing content that aligns with that, we can't just be writing content of things we like. We have to be writing content of what people are looking for. So I want you to think for a minute about your book, whether it's a completed manuscript in process or it's on the other end and it's published. And I want you to ask yourself those questions. I want you to think, what benefit does this book provide? And what solution is it for a person's problem? And how would somebody find it by searching for it? So think long and hard about how are you that solution? And what types of content can you be creating based on what someone is searching? So think when you go online, like we'll just use Marcus Sheridan's book, for example. Most people aren't going to go to Amazon or Google and type in inbound marketing, because most people don't even know what that word means. But they might put in marketing in general, or they might put in content, or they might put in content marketing, or they might put in how to draw leads to me, right? Like, so they're asking these questions. How do I increase sales? How do I get more readers? These are questions people might be asking, and his book can be a solution. And if he's writing content that is answering that question, then he's able to build his platform of visibility. I promise if this is making your head spin, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty here shortly. And let's see, I think we're actually going to dive into it right now. I'm looking at my notes to make sure. All righty. So the book is, how long is this book? It's a pretty hefty marketing book. I think I read it in a day and a half, but this is what happens when I find something that I love. Yeah, it's over 300 pages, but it is written in beautiful layman terms and a way that you would be able to really digest it. But there's so much information. I think it's one of those books that I could highlight every single sentence. But I wanted to pull out really a second kind of bucket outside of his kind of approach that will leave you all kind of thinking a little bit more about what type of content to create. And Marcus identifies that there's actually 5 areas when you look at all the content all of the questions that you come up with that people are asking, and all of the content that you can use to answer their questions. He buckets it into 5 areas. So I want to go over that because as you're navigating your list of questions, you will likely see yourself bucketing your questions in these areas. The first one is under pricing and costs. So I want to pause and just acknowledge for a minute that Marcus has written a book that is focused on business inbound marketing. And many authors are like, oh, but I just wrote a book. I didn't form a business. And I would beg to differ. I would raise my hand and say, the moment you published a book, my friends, you have become an authorpreneur because you have created a business. Whether you do anything else outside of selling books or you create an entire business from that book and its message, doesn't matter to me. You become an authorpreneur. So there will be questions people are asking that are beyond your book. And pricing and cost might be one of them. So I don't know about you guys, when I go online to look for something on someone's website and I can't find pricing of what it costs to work with somebody or what it costs to purchase something, if I have to reach out to them for information, sometimes I get really frustrated. And if you don't talk about pricing, people will wonder, like, what are you hiding? And it doesn't really build trust. So one of the things he recommends, which goes totally against what a lot of us feel at our core, is to start answering questions focused on pricing and costs. So I want you to be thinking, I'm going to toss out a couple things to think about. I want you to be thinking how you can share pricing and cost information through content, maybe on what it costs to have someone invite you to come speak or to work with you. Or maybe you have a book bundle, maybe you have a couple of books you put together. What's the price on that? Is there a bulk book discount? Maybe you could share that. If the cost, because this is a point of contention for a lot of people, it's uncomfortable. And I'll be honest, I am just now working on my website right now to make some tweaks so that the price points on what I do in my business is more visible based on the they ask you answer approach, because it is uncomfortable to share. But when you do, you're building trust, but you also give people the chance to decide early on if you're a good fit or not. Because sometimes budget is a deciding factor. So this lets people know early on if it's worth their time and investment to get to know you and work with you. Sometimes though, having you come to speak or offer a workshop that's based on your book, you might have variable kind of pricing points, and that's okay. So if it varies based on certain things, that's fine. Say it depends, and talk about what those variable costs and factors might be that impact those costs. Don't be worried about scaring people away when you write content around pricing and costs, because that's what questions people are asking. Don't be afraid that you're going to scare people away, because the reality is once you start writing about that, if they couldn't afford you, then you're just weeding out people that aren't the right fit for you from the beginning, and that's okay too. One of the tips that Marcus acknowledges is for you to list out all of the products and all of the services you offer. And right now it might just be your book, but you might want to be thinking about, well, maybe someone will want me to come speak about my book. That's a pretty logical next step for authors, is to become a professional speaker in alignment with your book's message. But write down all of the offerings you have. And Marcus encourages you in the long run to do at least one article or video about each of those, but to start with the ones with the greatest potential first. So this is an author tip. I'm going to give an author tip for each of the 5 buckets. Author tip number 1, this is for those of you who are authorpreneurs. What does it cost to work with you? People are going to want to know, so share it. Don't hide it. Nothing good comes when we're hiding. Nothing. Okay, number 2 is focused on problems. So that's another bucket. And this is probably, in my opinion, the biggest one. That is figuring out what are the problems that people who are potentially interested in your work, what are they having? And how are you a solution to them? Beyond that, though, people, when they buy, they're also worried about things like what might go wrong if we work together. Or, I'm thinking about with Marcus. So his content is all focused on the swimming pool industry and fiberglass pools versus in-ground pools versus concrete and all these other types of pools, right? So people might ask him, well, what happens if the fiberglass pool breaks, right? So he is building content around answering those problems. He's not hiding from the potential that there could be problems. So I want you to be thinking about your industry, what you wrote about, and some of the problems within that industry. Because as you start writing on those problems and how what you're offering is a solution, people are likely searching for those problems, right? So, for instance, my book is called Colored Today Pretty. It's really meant to be an inspirational guide for people in life, and it's focused on mindfulness. So, some of the problems that people who might find my book valuable have are around finding balance or understanding happiness or success, redefining success, all of those types of things. So, I should be writing content that speaks to those problems and be honest and transparent around them. So for instance, I'm not going to say when you buy Stephanie's book, all of your answers will be solved, because that's not true. Mindfulness requires commitment, and it takes time. And the reality is it's not something that happens overnight. And it's probably something, mindset specifically, that you struggle with forever. Mindset is something we all struggle with, but the more that you work on it, the better you get at it. So you don't want to answer with a definitive answer if it's not true, right? So be honest and transparent. And when you're really obsessed with the people who potentially are reading your book, that you want to read about your book, to read your book and to work with you potentially, then you will know their problems and identify them and then begin to offer up solutions. Sometimes those solutions aren't even your book. Sometimes it's something else, right? It might be a solution to go, speak to someone who is a lawmaker about a topic that is relevant. It might be a solution might be to talk to your professional or talk to your leaders or your HR department and get more professional development. The solution, there's so many different solutions out there. Don't feel like you always have to pitch yourself. When you're sharing information that's relevant and you're housing that information on places like your website, then it's already, you're already sharing directly and indirectly that you are a solution for them. So author tip: how does your book answer a problem or solve a problem? And I want you to be thinking from a content perspective to talk about all these problems openly, and how you can be a solution in the process. Okay, bucket number 3 is on versus and comparison. So think about when you go online and you're searching for something. I've actually just did this recently. You might be looking and comparing to. So for instance, this morning, my husband and I went on a tour. We actually homeschool our children, but we went on a tour for a cottage school. So I will likely do some research later on the pros and cons of a cottage school versus enrichment programs, full day versus half day, right? Like, see, this is a comparison. This is a versus, and customers, readers, your target audience, they're all really fascinated by this concept of comparing. So as you're pulling together that long laundry list of all of the questions that people may ask and how that you've come in contact with, that your readers might be thinking, I want you to think about what are things that they might be questioning? How would you compare the two? And think about how you can share that in a transparent way. This could be beautifully done in videos or webinars. You could create a guide that kind of has this comparison out there. And don't be afraid to talk about the competition. That's the author tip for this one. Don't be afraid to talk openly about others who might be doing what you're doing or not doing what you're doing, or even other options in your industry. So if you're in an industry, maybe you are in the leadership space, don't be uncomfortable talking about your type of leadership approach versus another type of leadership approach. You don't have to dog one or the other, but you can share that type of a leadership approach and acknowledge when some might be better than others, right? And how you might help someone make that decision. Okay, numbers 4 and 5 are very similar, so we'll put those together, and that's reviews or best in class. So another thing people are looking for when they are perusing the internet is ranking systems, the top 5 best marketing books, the top 10 places to go on vacation, the top 3 things to do when you're in the city, right? Like people love to look at rankings. So I want you to think about your industry, the topic that you wrote a book on, and could you create some content that does some sort of a review or a best in class approach? It could be the top 5 books in your industry, and maybe your book's one of those 5. Doesn't have to be either, right? Like that doesn't mean that you don't think your book's great. It just means that it shows that you're being even more transparent and honest. You could also consider doing best in class and reviews in an industry that could be a referral source for you in your business. So I'll go back to Marcus Sheridan. He did a best in class on the different types of companies that make fiberglass pools. So his business, you could purchase any of these different, but he did a ranking on his favorites, and it actually helped him sell some more. And it ended up being a compliment to his business. So think about your book's message. I might think about my book with Color Today Pretty, the mindfulness, and maybe I could come up with like a top 10 ways to be mindful. And my book might not even be a solution. It might be focused on yoga or art or meditation, and I can share that, and then at the bottom have a really beautiful kind of reminder that I have a book that could be a really good solution for them. Okay. Whew. Lots of stuff focusing on content. I'm just double checking to see if there's anybody else in that waiting room that we need to bring in, but I think we are good to go, and we're going to keep going. I realize that there's a lot, we just talked about a lot of content, and I've already given you some homework to come up with a list and figure out what that list might be to help you create content. But what I want to spend time now is pivoting over to what I am calling, some tips for how to leverage some content. So I know we know the value of content. We opted to write books. That's a content strategy. But sometimes this can feel so overwhelming. Like, where do I start? What does it mean? Like, you might be asking yourself, Stephanie, what does it mean? I'm already writing all the time. Are you telling me I need to write more? And I'm like, no, we're going to be smarter. We're going to work smarter, not harder. And yeah, you're like, I want to give my fingers a break. I get that. You might just want to even finish your book. I get that too. But my goal for you all is to ensure that you're building demand, you're drawing people to you, you're leveraging inbound marketing. I know you might feel like you have the time, but I want to walk you through how I leverage content and see if it might help you in this process. So this is kind of what I call my leveraging content flow. So there's 3 steps here, and then there's another slide I'll walk you through. The first step is, this is where the brainstorming comes in. So determine your pillar content, your evergreen content, and kind of some timely content. I think when you start creating that big laundry list of things that people might ask you on that you could be a solution for, that you could be talking about, those 5 buckets of content, you're going to start noticing some of these are pillar content pieces that just make sense in your book's message. Others are evergreen in the sense that you could write about something and it will never go bad. And then there's going to be other content that might just be timely for today, or it might be seasonal. So start with that. Okay. So you start with figuring out your content topics, and you can even bucket those. Okay, so like figuring out, all right, I've written typed the 6 pages of content ideas. I'm going to put those in buckets and notice, oh, these all talk about what happens before you work with me. These talk about this and that or whatever, kind of come up with themes. Then the next thing is I want you to determine the type of content you're going to deliver. So this is important for you to figure out your level of comfort. You could do it in 2 ways. You could do it in the written form, which is likely the most comfortable form for us to share content, because that's what we do for a living. we're writers. This could mean that you're writing content on your website, you're going to post it on your blog, you leverage it for a LinkedIn article, a guest blog on another website, something like that. Or you might find that you're tired of writing and you really enjoy talking or doing video or audio content. So you could do, this could be YouTube, this could be podcasts, webinars, workshops, etc. After you come up with the type of content and how you want to deliver it, then you need to figure out, where's this content going to live? And I mean, where's it going to live first? My preference for you guys would be for it to live on your website, because your website should be your digital hub. And hey, by the way, if you're like, Stephanie, a website, what? I don't know how to leverage it. Sneak peek, the topic for February's complimentary Empowered Author Workshop is on websites for authors. So I think you might find that really helpful. But most of this content should live on your website because you want to draw people back where they can learn more about you. But you might find, if you do a guest blog, that it's going to live on someone else's website, or you might find that you want to put it on YouTube or a podcast platform. But you need to figure out, where does this content live? And my recommendation is always for it to live on a place that you own first. All right. This next slide, you see all these arrows? I'm going to fill in what these arrows do, but I didn't want to overwhelm you all at first. But this is how I leverage content. So what I mean by this is, I do not come up with new content every day of every week. In fact, my drumbeat, we'll talk about drumbeats next, is focused on creating one piece of content a week and then sharing it on all the places. So I create one beautiful piece of content and then we leverage it. So it starts with the content. You got to start with the content. You got to figure out what those topics are. And that's why I spent time, a big chunk of today, talking about the They Ask You Answer approach to content. Because if you also are just creating content and nobody's finding you or your book, it could be that you're creating the wrong content. So I want to make sure that we're writing content that people are searching for. So let's say you wrote some content, 1,500 words or whatever, some content. What do you do with it? Well, typically that content should definitely go and be an article or a blog post or something on your website. I'm a big believer of it going on your website. All of that content should always go on that platform. However, what happens if you decided you wanted to do video? Totally fine. Do the video, post it to YouTube, and then share that on your website as a blog. Okay. Or what if you decide you want to do a podcast? Totally fine. In fact, the Empowered Author Podcast, this is how it works. I create content, it's a podcast, get it transcribed. While it's getting transcribed, I'm uploading the podcast to my YouTube channel, which, side note, y'all, if you're interested in the podcast and you much prefer video over audio, you can find some of the video podcast episodes on the YouTube channel. And then it still feeds into that article. So I'm creating one piece of content, whether it's written or video and audio, it's going to end up living on my website. And you should too. So yes, then it should become a website post. Now, some of this content, it makes sense that it is a blog on your site. Sometimes it's just a part of your content on your website. But your website should really be your digital hub. And again, we will talk more about your website next month. So then what do you do? Well, then I always like to extrapolate content, little nugget-sized information from the content I originally made, and use it for my social media shares. So I might do, like this week, the podcast that's releasing tomorrow is around publishing platforms. So this week's content on my social media is going to be all about publishing platforms, and it's going to drive people back to my article, which lives on my website, so that they can learn more about my book, my business, and all that goes in between. You can also leverage your content for external promotion. So you could also be thinking about who else needs this information? Do you know other people that have newsletters or blogs, or could the media find this helpful? Could you do a guest article? There's lots of other ways you could promote your content. And then I'm a big believer in also sharing it with your email list. You might be asking yourself, or saying out loud, or saying in your head, I don't have an email list. Well, I'm a big believer that on your website, you have a way to capture people who are interested in learning more about you and sharing your content. You should also be pushing that out through your email list. All right. See all of those little arrows? They wouldn't make sense to you if you didn't break it down like that. I realize that this can seem like a lot, but it's not. In fact, I find I typically spend about an hour creating content. And that's just because I don't like to stifle my creativity, and I tend to be a verbose writer. And then I spend about an hour coming up with the rest of the flow each week. That just tends to be kind of my drumbeat. But yours doesn't have to look like that. So let me kind of walk you through what a drumbeat could be. And when I mean a drumbeat, I'm talking about in your business, what's something that consistently you can do that feels good for you. And today we're talking about how can you create that drumbeat for content marketing and creating that schedule for 2022. The first thing is, you guessed it, content. Figuring out what types of content that you think you need to share. So I don't want you to just walk away from this and go, Stephanie told me to create all this content. I'm just going to create all this content and run with it. No, I want you to create the right content. So bucket your content, come up with those questions that we said in the beginning, bucket it, and identify which content is most timely and when. Is some content seasonal? So for instance, like in my business, I'm not going to be writing right now any content on book marketing tips for the holidays because we're past that. That's seasonal. You'll see something like that in November. But it might be, you might have something coming up. I have an author I'm working with right now, and he's in the spiritual and the Christian space. So we're working on something for Lent, which will launch in March. So I want you to think, is it something seasonal? Is it pivotal or pillar content? And determine how you want to drip your content out. The second in the drumbeat is focused on capacity. So I want you to think about your capacity for content creation, scheduling, social media creation, posting, etc., and be honest with yourself. If you are drowning, you might say, I can only get 30 minutes a week. I can only pull that aside. Maybe I can get up 30 minutes earlier one day and tackle this. That's fine. The best laid plans are only good if they're implemented. And that's why creating this drumbeat for you is important. So think about your capacity for all of that and be honest with yourself, and then set aside time to do it. I find for me, it really helps to do content in batches. So I will sit down for a couple of hours and maybe I'll get all my content written for the whole week or the whole month or the whole quarter. I did that with my podcasts. So I'm pretty much a quarter ahead in podcast creation. So that helped me with getting content created so I can focus on other things. So you might want to do it in batches, or you could sit down once a week and do it. I find that to be helpful as well. The next part in the drumbeat is understanding your capacity. I want you to identify where you have skills and where you need help. I see a lot of people who are like, oh, well, I can do social media, or I can learn how to get this up on my website, or I can just learn how to create a website. And you probably can learn all of that. But I have learned in my business and in my book process, and rest assured, when I tell you it took me 3 months to create my website, the first time I did it, that was not good use of my 3 months of my life. It was not good use of it. It would have been better if I invested in having someone do that. So identify where you have the skills and where you don't, and figure out when you need to ask for help. Do you need help posting stuff to your website, sharing stuff via email, creating and scheduling stuff through social? I have an author I've been working with for the last 2 years where we do all of that. He writes the content, gets it to me twice a month, and I take care of it from there. Get it posted to his email software system, get it on his website, pull out social, get it posted and scheduled, and it makes his life easier. So identify and be honest about what your capabilities are. Then determine what that cadence is. How are you going to leverage your content most? And where are you going to post it? And how are you going to share it? We didn't talk today about where to post on social, but I will say, if you're posting content on social, make sure that that's where your target reader lives. And make sure it's a place that you enjoy posting. For instance, I don't like Twitter. I'll just be honest. Hi, my name is Stephanie, and I don't like Twitter. I'm just not a Twitter fan. So even if my target audience lives there, I'm not going to be on Twitter. But I really enjoy LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. So you'll find me there. And my target audiences live there too. So understand kind of where they live and how you can post and how you're going to leverage that content the most. Then the final drumbeat is consistency. So you can have amazing content and you can do all of this stuff, but if you're not consistent, it'll fall flat. So ask yourself questions like this. How often am I going to create content? Is that going to be a once a week, a once a month, a once a quarter thing? How often am I going to share the content? This is a big one. Are you going to share it once a week, 3 times a week, once a month? And when I mean sharing, are you going to write that content and post it on your website or post it to a LinkedIn article? And then how often are you going to post on social? Are you going to do it 3 times a week or 3 times a day? Like, you've got to understand what that cadence is, and only you can determine this drumbeat, and only you can stick to it. All right, so how do you pull all of this together and put it into action? So I've got five steps here to consider, and then we will open up for questions. The first is to become obsessed with your target audience. I want you to brainstorm the questions that they need answers to, and the questions that you get asked daily. Okay, so that is, if you're going to think about what your homework is, this is your first homework. Brainstorm that list of questions. Then I want you to bucket those questions into categories so you can start to see trends and opportunities for content creation. I found it easier to do it that way, and I have different buckets, and I will go in a circle around with my buckets. I'll pull a question about each, and that's what we talk about, and kind of keep it varied. Then I want you to identify how you want to produce the content and where you want that content to live. Do you want to do it in the written form or the video and audio form? Is that going to live on your website or somewhere else? Get clarity on that. Then create a drumbeat for sharing that content, and a drumbeat that's going to help you work smarter, not harder. You shouldn't be writing social media content that's not in alignment with your content strategy unless it's relevant and timely. So I typically have where I release a blog once a week, and then 3 times a week, or a blog or podcast, some form of content once a week. 3 times a week, I usually post on social from it. Now, you might see me post on social for other things. Sometimes it's personal or something I get excited about, or a client story or whatever. That's fine. But when you create kind of this content inbound strategy, you want some consistency there. Then you want to always be listening to what people are asking you and adding to that list of questions, because you can then adapt and you can then respond accordingly. Y'all, I know that was a lot of information, and there's plenty of time. I think let's see, I gave us about 10 minutes left to answer any questions, but I just want you to know that content creation is something that we do when we're writing a book, but it's a concept that we can't stop there. We need to be methodical. We need to remain visible. And the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to be smart, work smarter, not harder. So understanding, our ideal reader will not only help us create content that is going to pull them in, but it's going to let them know that we want to hear from them. And in return, they'll want to hear from you. I think that's actually equally important in this process. As you think about a drumbeat, be honest with yourself and do what you can maintain, and that's consistent for you. And then I want you to just have fun with this, right? Writing content, as you know, writing a book is not fun. If it's not fun, you're going to delay. You're not going to do it in a timely manner. So you should become obsessed with your content creation approach to something you find joy in. And who knows, I have found actually in creating content in this way, it can help you work on your next book, because you can actually gather it all and create another manuscript from it. So I just want you to know that content creation support, from content strategy development to implementation, creation to sharing on social, that's something that we're pretty darn good at here at the emPowered PR group. So while you guys are pulling together some questions and sharing, I'm going to put in the link, a link to our website. There you can schedule a free 15-minute chat from us with me, and we can talk about how our team could help you with this if that's something you want. But enough about that. I would love to hear from you. I'm going to pull open the chat now, and I'm curious if any of you guys have any questions, just put it in the chat and make sure it is to everyone. So I'm going to type in here our website so you have access to it, or if you would like to get do a free 15-minute chat, we can do that. You're also willing, if you're willing and able to come off of mute, you're welcome to, and you can ask any question there as well. So I'll just pause for a minute, see if anybody has a question. All right, well, I have a couple questions I've been asked before. I'll start there, and then please do not hesitate to ask, because I want to hear from y'all. I've had somebody ask me, this is really good info, and it helps a lot, but they don't have clarity on who their target reader is, and they're not quite sure how to get started. So I wanted to share, if that's a place where you're at, I really think this is the first step. You want to take time and get crystal clarity on who your target reader, your target audience is. You can do that by looking at Amazon, going to Amazon, looking at your reviews. That can be really eye-opening, because you can get some feedback there. Listen to anybody who asks questions about your book or about your message, anyone who is engaging with you the most. Or someone like me can come in and help you with some deep level analysis too. But focusing on your target audience is really pivotal to this process. All righty. Okay. Another question here, and I'm actually going to stop sharing so you don't have to see. You don't see my screen. Okay. So, but I can see the chat better. Okay. Another question that I have gotten before on this topic that I want to share is, how much time should I be spending on content creation? That's a great question. I find for me, and for most people I work with, about an hour a week is what I spend if I don't do batch content creation. And that helps me create a new piece of content and then put it through the funnel for sharing. And that, is that when I sit down and do like content or social media content creation to align with my content, that might be another hour. So I don't know, for me, and I'm, like I mentioned before, I'm a verbose writer. But that doesn't mean you have to be. So you probably could even get it done in an hour if you're really tight and doing stuff like that. Another question that I have gotten is, what type of content should I focus on first? So another great question. So I typically focus on answering content or leveraging content by answering the questions I get the most. So think about, as you're pulling together your list of questions, think about the ones that people are asking the most. And that's where I would start, because that's usually what they're searching on Google first. All righty. Any questions? Anybody want to come off of mute and ask anything? Okay, I got another question here. I'm not on social media. I don't have an email list or a website. Where should I begin to share content? That is a great question. So I encourage everyone to have a digital hub as an author. So that typically is a website. I like websites because, I don't know about you all, a couple months ago, Facebook and Instagram went on a like blackout, like something random happened and it stopped for a hot minute. And I realized, I knew this, but I realized then, if all of your connections and engagement is only on social media, if the social media platform goes down, you've lost everything. So you definitely want to ensure that you have a place. It's like a digital hub, but that's like your storefront. That's where, you're out selling books. You're not a bookstore, but you're a digital space for them to do that. And like I mentioned before, next month we will focus on author websites, because I think it's really important. I also think every website should have an opt-in and a link to an email service. I tend to use MailChimp. It's my favorite actually so far. And that's because there's a free version. And I think most authors, it's nice to start in a free version. I believe in test before you invest. So where we can find a solution, a for now solution, it'll let us know for a later option, because you might find that you need something different than that service provides. And then, so I think everyone needs a website. I think everyone needs an email platform. And then I also think everyone should be visible on at least one social media platform, because social media allows for give and take conversation and engagement. But I recommend that you pick the social media platform that A, you love the best, and B, your target reader is on. If you focus on one or the other and not both, you will miss an opportunity, because you might, like I mentioned with Twitter, you might not like a platform, or you might love one and it's not the right one for your target reader. So make sure you find at least one to be on and have a conversation. If that's not a good fit for you, that's okay too. I do definitely think though you need a digital hub and you need some form of an email collection. You can always leverage a visibility strategy that doesn't align with social media, and can still help you tackle the reach and engagement you're looking for. if that's really the kind of the basis of an author platform, if that's something you need help with, y'all just holler. Okay. Our team can help you there. Okay. I am not seeing any other questions in the chat. However, just so you know, even though the call is wrapping up, doesn't mean if you have a question that you can't ask. So feel free to reach out and ask me directly. And my email, I'll put that in the chat too. If you don't know it, it is stephanie@empoweredprgroup.com. Just another reminder, I'll be posting this on the YouTube channel. I'll share that with you guys as well. Also, there you'll be able to get a link to the 15-minute chat with myself should you have any questions. You can also go to empoweredprgroup.com to learn more about what we can do and join us next month. It'll be fun. We'll talk about author websites and we have a lot to discuss. So I really appreciate you guys being here. Thanks so much. I hope you have a great Monday and a great rest of your week and an empowering week. Enjoy.